So today's a little bit different, and I actually got this idea from a call I was having with some other yoga health coaches, and someone had mentioned negative space drawing, and we were talking about finding the space between the material objects. So how do you explore into the space and transition your habits easily? It was a really good call and really insightful. And I thought, let's physically look in the space and see what we can recreate. And so that's really what today's practice is about. Now you will need a few things. You will need a pencil, a piece of paper, pretty straightforward, and then you will need something to draw. So I suggest personally getting a plant. So I have grabbed this orchid, and the blooms look so lovely down here. I'm hoping that these guys rebloom again. And I'm going to be drawing my orchid. You might have another plant, an herb. Plants are probably the easiest and one of the best things to draw. And if you don't have those things, you can get a chair that maybe has an interesting shape, or a couple chairs. Stick outside, any kind of branch. Great objects to draw. And I've just set it up in front of me. If you have a plain paper or something you can use as a background, that's ideal. I don't have that, but I have my window, and I think this will be pretty sufficient. It makes it a little easier to see when you are, when nothing's distracting you behind your object. So the goal is not to draw the plant itself, but to maybe zoom in on an area, and you can even cut a little square out of a piece of paper and like hold it up. It's called a viewfinder. I don't really use them, so I didn't make one for this practice, but some people might find it really helpful. You can just take your hands and kind of make this, shape like this, and create your own viewfinder when you're looking in front of you, just to see what you want to draw. So you don't have to draw the whole plant. I recommend zooming in on an area, maybe a branch or two, or in this case, I've got these kind of green pieces up top, and then I'm going to rotate my plant around till it makes an interesting shape for me. And the goal, again, is not to be totally perfect with this, but to really look about seeing the spaces between the object. And then we'll kind of regroup on how this comes back to how we are evolving in ourselves, how we are finding the spaces in our own lives through this cleanse, through this reset, and this week, and ways we can evolve further. All right, so grab your stuff if you're not set up. And if you do happen to join or pop on, give me a little wave or a hello. I'd love to see who's joining. And I'm going to flip my paper down so you guys can see me work, but it's not totally necessary. So give me just a moment. Excuse my mess as I flip my camera. And then you guys will be able to see right here. There's my orchid. And I'm sorry, I've got a million things on my table. So I'm going to flip my camera down. And let me just pull it back so you guys can see my paper. My paper's kind of big, which perhaps I should have gone smaller. So you do not have to use a huge piece of paper. I will try and keep it in the frame. In fact, maybe what I'll do, I'm going to rip this out of my sketchbook and just fold it in half. All right, so I'm not trying to create the greatest work of art ever. I'm going to scale it down because I think this is 11 by 14 tablet, so this will make it a lot more achievable. And then I can just cut the bits off at the side. All right, so as I'm drawing, I'm going to tilt this up so you guys can see. And hopefully it's not too distracting with everything behind it. All right. So you can see here, I'm going to be drawing, I'm going to try and hold my pencil up, the shape around the flowers. Okay, so I want to be looking for the space between the objects. All right, so you look at it in terms of what shapes these things make, not looking at the flowers, and that's the tricky part. So that's really the goal. You can see that's almost triangle shape here, and this shape here. And so I'm only drawing the outline, the space around it. I'm not drawing anything in the middle. So this whole area is just going to be, you can see I'm tracing it, trying to do it the best way I can. It's going to be plain white. And then we can do some cool things after we draw it, and I'll give you guys options. And I won't necessarily get through all these today. All right. So you can see my paper. And let's see. So I am just going to start looking at the object in front of me and not really looking that much at my paper. And it doesn't matter if this doesn't turn out great. All right. So I'm doing kind of a look up, and then I'll glance down here and there. But I'm literally drawing the flowers. And it's going to be hard to draw and talk, but I just want to look at the angles and the shapes around the space. So I'm looking between the spaces. And looking at negative space is actually one of the most helpful ways to learn how to draw the positive space, because you're looking in a different way. You're not seeing it for what it is, right? You're seeing it for a line, a shape, and a space on your page. So I'm looking at the angle of the petal, and I do have an eraser, so you can, if it messes up, no biggie. And then you're going to be looking for this angle, and it's okay if you got to draw over it a few times. So this is just a sketch, and I'm looking, okay, here's this space here. And it's not necessarily going to look like anything really specific as you go. And it's nice when you have objects that overlap, so where the branches overlap, the flowers, etc. It really helps you see into the space. So everyone that says, oh, I can't draw, this is a really great activity, and you actually are tapping into a different part of your brain. So when we see the object for what it is, for the flower, we are tapping into our analytical side of our brain, often called the left side of our brain. And that's a little much. So when we look at the spaces and the spatial relationships between things, we are tapping into the right side of our brain. So the right side is literally responsible for the way we see spatial relationships between objects. And we can make this analogy in our lives as well, right? How often do we overanalyze something? And I am so good at doing that. I don't know about you all, but I am the queen of overanalyzing. And I got to get all the research and all the data, and I forget to look and tap into how I might be seeing these relationships differently. So in my mind, that's my spiritual state, right? It's my intuition. It's how I get guidance around me. All right, so I'm trying to see this angle, and I wish there was some way I could show you the flower as I draw. And you can see how much I'm zooming in, right? And right now you can see how the shape of the flower is emerging, even though you don't exactly see the flower, you don't know where the inside is, but it's starting to emerge and come out. And then I'm looking for this space between the petal and between the stem. I'm looking at this shape that's forming. I'm making adjustments as I need to. And then this is going to curve down. And what's hard is to not get caught up in what you're seeing. So I'm looking up and I'm looking down, looking up, looking down. And I'm going to keep going. And I might just shift this over so you guys can see as I move over. And like I said, some of this might not make a ton of sense, but it's okay if it's not clicking right away. And, squinting your eyes can be a huge help. So I feel like this is in the wrong spot. This is too long. And I'm actually squinting my eyes, and I'm kind of lining up. So this petal ends here, and I see down here is where that other petal starts. And it's overlapping the branch. And then I'm going to draw down here and just draw the shape a little bit more, hopefully accurate to what it is. And because I'm not taking the time to step away and come back like you would normally in a drawing, you might get things that are a little bit wonky, but we don't want to spend too long doing that today. We don't want to spend too long analyzing it. We really are just looking for the spaces and seeing what comes out. And it might be really interesting to you to see how things are in relationship to one another. So as I come up here, I'm looking at this flower shape and then this shape between the petals. And I might need to adjust a little bit. I think I do. So I'm going to draw this down. I feel like this comes out a little bit further. And I'm squinting at my object in front of me, looking at this shape and analyzing this space between it. And when we can forget about what we're drawing, it's amazing what can happen. Our drawing skills can go up by 10 because we've just taken out this whole piece of I'm drawing a face, I'm drawing a tree, I'm drawing a cup, a chair, whatever it is that you might have in front of you. And we're taking away that piece. All right, now here's where this other stem intersects and comes up. And there's a little thing there. All right. And then here it comes down. So this is where it gets interesting to me, is that now I'm looking at this space and I see that this shape is all wrong. So I'm going to curve this around. Like I said, I wish there was some way you guys could see what I'm doing. There's got to be a better way. I'm going to angle this up so you guys can see, though. So now I'm looking at this triangular shape between. So let me just tilt it up. I'm looking at this shape here between the flowers and the stems. All right. And then I'm going to keep going. So usually when I do these drawing classes, I don't need to show anything except for my page. Excuse me. Got this dry cough. All right. So there's this shape, and then this is here. So I'm going to draw the other side of this. And there'll be something here. And that's that flower coming down. Oops, it might be down here like this. And then there's this little triangle between things. So this is where it gets interesting and actually becomes slightly easier, is you're drawing the triangles, the squares, whatever shape you're seeing between things. So when it's out in space over here, it gets a little bit harder. When things start to intersect is where it gets more interesting and a little bit easier, actually. So this has this guy. Sometimes they don't line up, and you might look at it and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to make that adjustment. And sometimes you'll start seeing what the object is, and then things might get a little messed up. So here, this comes up here, and then I've got this continuing, and I've got this long, skinny shape here, coming all the way up. You can say this is not some fabulous, great work of art, right? And this is actually my straight stick, so you can see it's not straight at all. So I'm going to adjust this and make this a straight line. And this is the little piece that props everything together, like the wooden stick that comes up through here. And there's no shame in using a straight edge, okay, in any drawings. You can grab that and use it if you want. So I'm going to use my straight edge. And it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. But now I can be like, okay, I know that's straight. Although maybe it's a little bit of an angle when I look at it for real. So come back here and kind of trace over what I did and see how this comes out. Okay, so you can see there, this shape is a little messed up at the top because that should be straight. So then I know this angle needs to readjust. There we go. And then there's some intersecting things happening up here. I don't want to spend too long on this side of the drawing, so I feel like I'm just going to draw this other piece, and this would be a lot easier if I flipped my ruler to the other side. And I'm going to draw it parallel, And I move that out to the side, and then that's there. Now this comes down this way. So I've got this shape, which is a little bit off. Again, it doesn't matter too much. And then this is going to come down here. And I've got this shape of the petal over here. Oops, and I missed this little space. I didn't see this little fellow earlier. So he's going to come up like that. There we go. And you know, you can spend a long time doing a drawing. So the goal of this is to just explore into it. And I'm going to erase this line. So here you can see where the flowers overlapping with the stem, and then this is the support stick. And there's some activity happening up in here that I find really interesting. So if I look up here, there's another branch that's intersecting, and it's coming down, and it's making a cool shape in between. And then, like I said, it gets a little tricky when things stop intersecting. So I'm just looking at my angles, kind of eyeballing it. And then I'm noticing this stick comes down. Now it depends where I'm sitting. So as I move a little bit, it's going to shift a little bit. But more or less, it comes down to here. So it might be easier to start here for me. But then I have to keep this shape in mind. So how does this guy get over here? And I'm going to draw back up and see what happens. And it might be like, oh, this is all wrong. That's okay. It's totally a little bit crazy right there. So let us try this way. And it's okay. Like I said, it's not perfect. It's an exercise in seeing that we're working on. And it's hard because whenever I shift, that stick shifts positions. So I'm struggling a little bit because it's never the same when I look up. So let me try this again. And sometimes your mind starts getting like, oh, it's just a stick, and you just want to draw it like a certain way. And that's where it gets tricky. That's where the mind of play comes in. And we're like, okay, it's not just a stick. It's a shape. It's an angle. And there's space around it. And I need to honor what that shape is and what that space is. Just as we need to honor what we feel in our bodies in the moment. All right, and I totally just looked in the wrong spot and messed that up. But that's okay. I got a little ahead of myself. I'm going to retrace what I was doing. Here we go. This guy comes down. And I can see that I've got a little bit of a mess up of a shape in here, but that's okay. The idea is to just try and figure out where it needs to go. And it's funny how you'll start to struggle. And I feel like I'm struggling more in this because I'm seeing it as a branch. I'm trying to see the spaces. And it's really hard sometimes. All right. Not the greatest branch. That's okay. And you can see my drawing is pretty not super nice and neat here. But the cool thing is, as we finish, we will either color around this so it won't matter, or we can cut it out and then cut out the positive space to leave the negative space, which is a little bit hard. Or we can cut it out and then place like a black paper behind it, which I think is cool. Leaving the positive space in white, the negative space in another color. And then that will really help it stand out. And it looks pretty cool actually when you do that. All right. So I'm going to shift back down here to this guy. So we've got the top of these flowers. And I left off. Okay, so that was the top of this flower. That's a petal. That's the top of a flower here. There's this petal coming up. And then as I come down here, I'm looking at the shape that's coming out. And there's another petal here. And then again, looking at the spaces between, there's this little guy curling up. And again, I think my proportions might be a little bit off, but that's okay. So let me come around to this guy. And I'm getting a little lost in my design here. All right, this is the big petal here. And there are spaces between these petals. There we go. So I'm actually going to stop and draw this other shape in the middle where things are intersecting. That will give me a little bit of guidance to where I'm headed. And this is another petal coming out at me here, and then this has got two sides. And this petal is going to come down, and you can see how I'm jumping around a little bit. Find sometimes that makes it easier to do this type of thing. Alright, so here's this shape in the middle, and then I'm looking at this shape underneath. And it's kind of a crazy shape, but that's alright. And then we are coming back up here. And this is actually, I'm going to come in here a little bit. It's got this little peekaboo shape. Little teeny tiny. And now this is where this guy should be. So let's extend him out a little bit. There we go. Now it looks like some crazy creature, doesn't it? I'm going to connect my points here. Doop, doop. And I might need to sharpen my pencil a little bit. But you can see as I go, things are starting to take a little bit of formation. They're starting to transform a little bit. This is driving me nuts up here, but I really struggled on this part of the branch. It makes me want to erase it and start again, but that's okay. And for the sake of time and not being too critical, I'm going to keep going. All right, so again, I'm looking at this shape here. I actually think it looks pretty good. And I'm going to draw this part down here. And that comes back. And then it gets a little tricky where it kind of cuts in. So I'm just going to do the best I can in terms of like, okay, there's that space there. This comes around here. Tiny little space between there, and then this comes up. And then, let's see, I'm going to stop and come back up to the top because I can see where the other branch is, and I feel like this might start to get a little bit crazy if I kind of just go off on its own. So I'm going to bring this over and draw the shape between these tops of these petals. And this comes down. Alright, sorry for all these long pauses. To talk and draws, especially when you're trying to see, I'm not just kind of doodling on a page, which I love to do, so don't get me wrong. You can kind of see how this comes down. I've got this shape here. It's a little bit off, so I'm going to re-angle this guy and kind of come up this way. There we go. And I stop and look once again at the shapes, and there's almost like a little bump here. I can be like, oh, that's actually like this. And then it helps me to come down here and say, does that line up? All right, so this shape should actually be more angled. Like that. Excellent. And then this comes up, and then I can draw this down and actually line up pretty well, which is pretty cool. Alright, draw this angle down here. Alright, I'm drawing the space over here now. Sorry, so what I was just doing was drawing this stem here. And it's a little wonky, so this might need to come out a little bit wider here. Totally cool. It's hard to see because I have this little clip that I don't want to draw, this little plastic clip. Alright, so we're coming back over to this area. So I'm drawing this shape between the stem and the flower petal, and then it kind of angles down and comes over. Comes back out. And this is where it gets tricky because I have this area that comes down, so I need to draw this space down here. So this guy comes down this way and it goes straight up. Angles up. Angles up. And then the space between them is sort of like this. So This needs a little bit of adjustment. And you can go back and erase after. Sometimes I'll do like 4 or 5 lines and then I'm like, okay, which line looks the best? So I want to draw this shape in between here. And I think that this looks pretty good here. And I'm just going to draw this up here. And then this needs a little bit of love. This shape is wrong. So I'm erasing just so I can kind of see it a little bit better. But you can even see, I can kind of look up here and be like, okay, this petal is lined up with that. And drawing that shape in between, that looks a little bit better. Great, so now you can see the bulk of my negative space drawing, and I'm going to pull my camera up so you can see a little bit better. Pardon me. All right, so this is what I have so far. I haven't drawn any of the leaves. I haven't kind of drawn much down here. And I could continue going, and maybe I will. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So now this gets tricky because I have to draw this big space between where the flower petals are and then the top of the leaf. So I'm going to really look and squint and kind of try and get this proportions more or less accurate. So maybe I start here. I'm going to bring this guy down. This is my stake that holds it. And I'm really looking up in here. And then I'm going to just feel it out. I'm going to start, and I know that the tip of this leaf lines up with this point here, kind of about here. So that helps. Right, so I'm looking at my spatial relationships of things next to each other. And then I'm going to do my best to draw this shape. And it's a pretty severe curve. And then I want to be looking at this space. Does this look like an accurate proportion? And it doesn't look too bad to me. So I'm just going to draw him like this. And then at this tip, there's this little shape here, and then it comes over, and then there's another leaf that intersects, and that's going to line up close to here. And so I can kind of see this shape underneath. And if anyone has ever taken an art class, even like high school, there's a good chance you've done something like this in your art classes. All right. And just because I have this kind of interesting stuff going on over here, I'm going to go ahead and finish this section out. So this guy came off and he went a little bit awry. So I'm going to try and draw him down here and re-look at my shape. So I've got this sort of triangular shape that looks pretty darn good. And then the top will follow that general shape here. Sometimes it comes a little wider and goes out. It's like a little line of something there. All right, so this shape looks a little better. He's still a little fat, so he needs to come in a little skinnier. And this is my stake. And then this is where the top of the leaf is. And it intersects another leaf. And that comes over, and then this is my vine. So I'm reassessing my shape. He needs some work. All right, so keep looking, keep evaluating. Excellent, and now I can redraw this line because I know it runs more or less parallel. I can adjust it if I need to. And it really runs into about here, and then there's another leaf there. So this may not look like a lot, but this is all where the leaves are in the plants. I'm going to fix the tip of my leaf so it's got that nice little point on it that I can see. Yep. Okay, so here we are. All right, so now here is the drawing. You can see the orchid. I'm going to flip up one more time. So here's the plant. And I really focused in on this area. And then I should really... Okay, sorry folks, I think I bumped something. I don't know what just happened. I think I hit finish when I was trying to re-angle the camera and I cut everybody off. All right. So I just want to show you guys, I'm going to stand up for this last part so I can zoom out. And I just want to show you the next step for our drawings. So I'm going to come all the way up here. There we go. It's really hard to do this with, I have this weird like snake arm thing that holds my phone, which is great, but then it bounces. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm pretty happy with how this looks overall. Minus this little branch up here, but he's all good. So we can, you know, if you wanted to take the time, I could go back and readjust him. I think for the sake of this project, he's good. So you can cut out, if you want, this inside part, and then you're just going to be left with the negative space, which could be really fun. You can also shade. So if you have your pencil, you can begin to shade either the positive space, leaving the white part in the negative space, or shade the negative space, which is what I like to do, and leave the positive space white. And if you have like black and want to use, you know, make it really contrasted, go for it. I'm going to do just one section colored in, and then I think I want to cut out. So I'm going to post my finished piece after. But you can start to really see your shapes pop out, and this is where I should probably clean up my lines a little bit after I was done, just so I can get that out of there. And you don't have to get fancy. I like to go in maybe one direction so it doesn't get too messy. So pick a direction, or at least sort of like fan out. If you go from a corner, you can fan out that way. And you can get fancy if you want to add darker value. You can get really fancy. And that's what we would normally do in art class, but we don't really need to do that. So normally you could just fade it out, right? You go dark behind the object and then fade it out to lighter, and you can make some pretty cool effects. So, but already, isn't it looking so cool? Standing out. And then if you cut it out instead, and you can see how this stem is just like disappeared. He sort of runs into this guy, so this is again where the clip is. I might just take this and sort of transition it a little bit. It gets a little hairy, and there probably is a space in here that I can't see, but I'm going to leave it out for now. But it gets a little confusing up in here, right? Because everything's overlapping, but that's okay. All right, so you can just begin to see, if you choose to color, how this starts to take on its own little life, and it gets really cool. And what you can do out here, this is where I kind of tend to fade out. So let me do this shape, and then I'll show you. All right, so here's the shape. And see, it's starting to pop out. Now what do you do where it's just open? That is the question. So that's where if you're cutting out, you can, you know, it won't really matter because you're cutting out the positive shape, and then you're left with this cool background, and you can put a colored behind and see your positive shape opposite your negative shape. I like to do the background dark. I may not cut out, we'll see. But then you can start to transition this a little bit, and this is where a little bit of art skills can come in handy, but you can see I'm just slowly starting to fade it out a little bit. And I'm sort of following the contour of the plant for how I'm shading. I am only using one pencil. I'm not getting really fancy with details. I'm not creating something super complicated, but I understand if you're like an aversion to art, how this can be a little scary. So again, collaging is a fantastic option. And if you're more inclined to shade and work on your value scale here, and really you just do this. I'm using kind of the side of my pencil. You can see I'm holding it like this, right? I'm not holding it upright. A little bit towards the side. And if I feel like there's too big of a jump, I can layer it back in here. And I'm just giving it less pressure, all right? We're keeping it real simple today. We're not getting crazy with the different pencils. I think I'm just using an HB pencil, which is on the lighter side. Where we normally have, number 2 pencils. That's our standard pencil. So you can actually get a little bit darker, probably. And you can see where the transition isn't great. So I'm just layering it back in here. All right? And you can fade out this way. So that means you don't have to fill your entire page with black. You can just do a little bit. All right. So it is 2:10. I want to wrap up these last few minutes, so let me finish this space. And I just want to talk about what this drawing activity has to do with our spring reset. And I'm going to talk about that as I finish this section. So we've talked about finding space in our lives, seeing the spaces between objects, and that is so relevant to our own personal journeys, right? Because how often are we just looking at the material things? How often are we looking at the surface level things and we're not seeing around it? So that might mean that you want to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, or I don't like my belly. But what is the deeper issue there? What can you see when you lean into the fact that you might feel something different? Is it really about the weight? Is it about the feeling you get when you look in the mirror? Is it about feeling like you're not doing good for your body? What is that deeper meaning that lies underneath your feelings? And I guess I am going to keep talking and drawing. So I just would like you to think about that. And that could be anything. It doesn't just have to be weight. How many of us are big time shoppers? And we're always trying to fill our spaces with material things, right? So what happens? What is the reason for filling our space with stuff? And this is not with judgment. So believe me, I am as guilty as anybody, especially you go back a year ago. I mean, Amazon shopping is a daily. And I know Amazon's great for I can't get my organic mung beans, so I have to order them online. Like, there's realities to things I want to get. So it makes sense. But not just saying, okay, I need some beans. I need some herbs. I can't get them locally. I'm going to order them. Think about what you're doing when you just say, okay, I want to buy all this stuff. I need to buy this. I need to buy that. What are you filling in your life by shopping? And so this activity is really about taking a deeper look and just observing and letting go of the judgment if you can. That's one of the hardest parts. I do it to myself every single day. A lot of us were raised in an environment of judgment, and probably the majority, if not all of us, right? So training ourselves to let go of the judgment, that's huge. And just observe and not feel bad. maybe I Amazon shop because I feel like I'm missing social connection in my life. Or maybe I need to sit down and do something creative in my life and I'm not filling that need. So just think about yourself, and I invite you to write it down. Heck, you can use the back of your drawing if you like. And just think about, where can you find space between the material things? Where can you find space in your life? And if you can't find it, can you make it? We all say we don't have time to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. But is it that we don't have time, or we don't prioritize it and we don't want to make the time? Maybe we're afraid of what we'll see. I don't have time to work out, but I have time to watch Netflix every night. So what's the priority? And just feel into that. All right, I'm going to stop coloring and I'm going to flip up. Flip back around. So I really hope that some of you guys take the time and do this activity. I would love to see what you guys get from it. Post your final results if you feel comfortable doing that. And if not, that's okay. But even just giving me a word, a comment back on the video. Where can you find space? Excuse me. And what do you want to prioritize in your life? Just think about it. Jot it down. Think about your anchor word. So my word's integrity. But finding space is absolutely part of my integrity. And it's not that I don't have integrity, but I want to be aligned between what I know I should do and what I'm actually doing. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm just 1 minute over. So I hope some of you guys join and leave your feedback, and I'll pop on tomorrow and check in with you all. All right, have a great afternoon. Namaste.